All right, first rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, that's not legal advice. So this is going to be after waivers for week 13 of fantasy football. This is going to be the proactive waiver wire show where you don't knife fight with everybody. You just casually pick up the guys that are going to win you leagues after waivers clear. So anyway, to start this up, if I pull up my notes real quick, this is the time to get ready get your playoff rosters ready. If you're in that position to do so, if you're one of those guys that are having to, you know, cross your fingers at the last moment to see if you're going to win week 13, week 14, and backdoor your way in, I understand that. If you're one of those guys that already know that you're in that position, or you've already got your bye week, or you look like you're going to get your bye week, something along those lines, and you have the luxury to start planning ahead and know who you're going to use and when you're going to use them, and those other guys that are out there that you don't want rolled against you at some point during their playoffs. Like those become the really important guys again. Like roster your cuffs. It's probably a little bit less important to be rostering other people's cuffs at this venture of the game. Like somebody else should be rostering their own cuffs. As you get into your playoffs, like having your guy becomes a little bit more important at this point of the fantasy season going into your playoffs. Those are the important guys to go after. Week 13 buys, there aren't any. There's 3 Thursday night games. There's one Friday night game. And then week 14 buys, and I have that pulled up right here. Week 14 buys, you're looking at the Broncos, the Colts, the Pats, the Skins, the Ravens, and the Texans. Week 14 defenses to be taking a look at if they are available in your league. And again, I don't know how competitive your league is. The Titans right now going up against Jacksonville, that probably would be one of the better ones. I actually have this one pulled up so we can take a look at some of the better defenses. You see the Titans right there. And as long as Will Levis is, serviceable, that means that the defense is a better and better play versus the matchups that are going to be going on out there. You can be looking at the Giants and the Saints, and your guess is going to be good as mine. Like if you want to be rolling those defenses against those offenses because of the situations that are going on. Like maybe the Saints are going to look a little bit better on offense. Some of the news that's out there right now, I think I saw that Chris Olave is going to be practicing, which means I am less concerned that the Saints are just going to be turning the football back over to the other team. Which means that like now I can start planning to maybe roll their defenses against some of the better matchups that are going to be going on out there. The Eagles are going to be playing the Panthers. This is another one where it's like, hey, you can plan ahead, but if Bryce Young and the Panthers look better, maybe it's not such a predictive role. But the Eagles are not necessarily a bad defense this way. The Bucks are going to be playing the Raiders, and again, I talked about this like 2 weeks ago. The Bucks are probably one of the defenses to be holding right now as a set and forget defense, and then having that other defense to be streaming around those negative matchups with the Buccaneers. So if they're available, I would probably not be proactive, or I would not be reactive. Let's see. I would be reactive when it comes to the Buccaneers. I would not be proactive about them. If they're available proactively, yes, I would be aggressive about picking those guys up. And you're also looking at the Cowboys and the Bengals. And again, like your guess is going to be as good as mine if you want to be rolling out that bad Bengals defense against the Cowboys, even though predictively you could say like Cooper Rush or even like Trey Lance might not necessarily be a bad matchup out there. All right, let's get into it a little bit, starting off with the 49ers. So take some of these stats with a grain of salt because, obviously Brock Purdy was out. He did practice on Monday for whatever that's worth. And, so I'm not as concerned with what's going on with last week's usage when it came to the 49ers. Obviously, Brandon Allen is rolled out again, or Josh Jacobs is rolled out. Like I probably would be downgrading the 49ers toys at this point. But when it comes to like last week's usage, I'm not as concerned about it. The big thing is Jordan Mason. He was at 18% snaps. There was no Isaac Uriendo. So, that gives you an idea of like who the cuff is going to be. Debo was at 67% snaps. Jennings was at 92% snaps. Ricky Pearsall was at 67% snaps. And again, I don't really care about the stats outside of at this point. I think like we can say like Jawan Jennings is quote unquote the wide receiver one. Kittle may be the unicorn when it comes down to it, but like Jawan Jennings, 92% snaps, 7 targets compared to Debo and his 67% snaps, 4 targets. I did see some like, Twitter drama when it came to Debo. I don't really care about that stuff if you're wondering about that. And then there's George Kittle, 84% snaps, 6 for 6 for 82 and a touchdown. So again, like, if not a unicorn, he's the next best thing. I did talk about that in the offseason. Like, he was an injury away from being a league winner. So I changed my mind on my thoughts on George Kittle heading into the season, just based off that if we can tell the story about how that guy wins you a league at the price that they're going at, that's like the easy thing. All right, moving on to the Bears. I did watch a little bit of tape on Caleb Williams and how the offense looks. And again, I think this is like mostly coaching of being able to put your guy in the best position to win games. Now, I talked about this already when it comes to Caleb Williams. I'm less concerned with the coaching on this one and more concerned with the defensive matchups being like the Lions, the 49ers, the Minnesota Vikings, the Lions again, and then like maybe Seattle on the chip. I would feel the most comfortable rolling Caleb Williams and the toys out there. Otherwise, like you're looking at like not very good matchups to be rolling these guys. DeAndre Swift was at 55% snaps in this game. And more importantly, if you're wondering about all this stuff, Roschon, 38% snaps. And when it comes to the red zone usage, all 3 red zone opportunities went to Roschon. He had 2 red zone carries. He tugged on one of them. He had the red zone target also in this game. So, yeah, probably lower end RB2 when it comes to Roschon. We can maybe start talking about having that conversation. And then based off of just not having the opportunity to score touchdowns, this would downgrade DeAndre Swift regardless. DJ Moore had 7 targets, 25 air yards, 81 yak. Keenan Allen in this one, and again, this is about like being able to trust where these guys are. Like they're all wide receiver 3s. 15 targets, 122 air yards when it comes to him. And then finally, Rome, you're looking at 87% snaps compared to Keenan Allen. I believe Keenan Allen was at 89% snaps in this one right there. Rome was at 87% snaps, 10 for 5 for 39. All 3 wide receivers had 2 red zone targets in this one. Also saw on Twitter today that only Calvin Ridley has more uncatchable air yards than Rome does. So again, if you're tracking the guy that has the best possibility of having that like spike week, that league winner / weekly winner, it's still going to be Rome out there when it comes down to it. Cole Kmet had 80 air yards in this one. I believe that's what I wrote down. 100% snaps, 10 for 7 for 64. He also had 2 red zone targets. So again, like, that's back into that, like right on the fringe of like, should I roll him or shouldn't I roll him, depending on how deep your league is. If you need that tight end one, that's out there. The only real news that I have right now when it comes to the Bengals, because there's not a lot of health stuff going on, is I would just point out when it comes to, and I can go back to the Bears to talk about this, when it comes to Khalil Herbert, and we're talking about like Amari Cooper a little bit later. When it comes to Khalil Herbert, the low amount of usage since the trade, I imagine that you were going to have a good idea of how much he's going to be integrated into the offense on a week-to-week basis. This is more an issue of when you're looking at your whether or not you have like league winner Chase Brown is going to be like based off this week. So I would probably have my expectations of Chase Brown muted this week, especially because of the matchup against Pittsburgh. And then there's the possibility that you're going to be losing a certain amount of gravy on top of red zone work, just like with Roschon and DeAndre Swift. If you're wondering about that stuff. Moving on to the Bills, they also had a bye week, and I don't have a lot of news on them right now. Didn't see any news on Keon Coleman yesterday. So there's no news on him, and I did not see any news about Dalton Kincaid when it comes to the injuries. And this would be another one, and I'll bring up the Browns to talk about this. This would be another one with them coming out of the bye. Like this would be when we would find out like what Amari Cooper's going to be. So he's definitely in that like wide receiver 3 range, with the expectation that you may end up getting league winner Amari Cooper. He may just be a solid wide receiver 2 because they could generally be spreading the football around when it comes to all that stuff. All right, moving on to the Broncos in this one, and we'll start off with the running backs. Javonte Williams had 3 red zone carries in this game. Audric Estime did have 1 red zone carry in this game. He was only at 7% snaps though, and Javonte Williams was at 56% snaps. So again, like that 1 week aberration trying to chase that does seem like it was a bad idea. Jaleel McLaughlin did lead everybody when it came to rushing on that 29% snaps, 7 for 44 versus Devontae's 8 for -2 in this game. So again, trying to guess on that stuff. Cortland Sutton, he had both of the team's red zone targets. He had 2 touchdowns on those two touchdowns on those 2 red zone targets. He also had 104 air yards. Some of the other stuff that was going on, like tracking the wide receiver 2 when it comes down to this. There's no news on Josh Reynolds right now on that gunshot. Little Jordan Humphrey was at 56% snaps. Vele was at 65% snaps in this one. I did talk about him in Chasing the Dragon. He had 95 air yards in this game, so 65% snaps, 9 for 6 for 80. Yeah, can I see a slight uptick in him? Would this move this like into the wide receiver range, wide receiver 3 range, like the dart throw? Probably. I don't know how much I would necessarily trust any of these guys going forward. Trying to get ancillary pieces of not good offenses is probably not a good way to be tracking your league winners. So you have to be in like deep enough leagues. I did see a comment about like 16-man league. Like that's where the range of where I would be worried about trying to track a guy and pick up a guy like Vele. Troy Franklin had 40% snaps. He did have 86 air yards. Marvin Mims was at 24% snaps. This is all dynasty stuff, if you're wondering. Troy Franklin, he did have 86 air yards on those 40% snaps. Marvin Mims, again, this is like strange usage, kind of like Kansas City when it comes to like just grab bag stuff. 24% snaps, 56 yak, -4 yards before reception in this one, if you're wondering about that stuff. And then I don't care about the Denver tight ends, other than I did see that Greg Doltz was released and then picked up by the Giants, if you're wondering about that stuff. All right, moving on to the Browns. This was that snow game with the Browns. Don't have a lot of news on these guys right now. The big one would be like Cedric Tillman dealing with a concussion. There's no news on that. And they do play on, go back a week. They do play on Monday night, so there's a slightly better chance between Thursday to Monday that you're going to have the ability to either roll Cedric Tillman or roll one of the other wide receivers, because there's vacated opportunities when it comes down to this one. Cedric Tillman was at 53% snaps. I can bring him back up so I can talk about him. He was at 53% snaps, 4 for 2 for 28. Did have a fumble lost in this game. Jerry Jeudy was at 83% snaps, 6 for 6 for 85, 71 air yards. And then finally, like Elijah Moore, like that would be the main beneficiary of moving Elijah Moore probably up into, better feeling good, out of desperation range when it comes to like rolling out your Elijah Moore shares. 69% snaps, 5 for 3 for 21. A little bit more news. Again, this is kind of like dynasty stuff more than anything else. Jamari Thrash, a 5th-round draft pick out of Louisville. I did like him coming out of the draft. He was up to 21% snaps with Cedric Tillman being out in this one. All right, David Njoku did have both of the 2 red zone targets when it comes to the Browns. So that keeps him in that mid-range tight end 1 range, for the time being. All right. Moving on to the Buccaneers. In this one, and Baker Mayfield's like really fun to watch. There was a clip of him running all the way down the field to get a block for Bucky Irving. But again, unfortunately, not a real football channel in this one. First of all, Rashad White, he was at 49% snaps, did have a red zone carry and a red zone target. He did tug on the red zone carry right there. And then you're looking at Bucky Irving. I'm looking at my notes, if you're wondering. He was at 52% snaps, 12 for 87, and a touchdown, 6 for 6 for 64, a fumble not lost. He did have 2 red zone carries. He tugged on one of those, and then 2 more red zone targets in this game. So, at this point, maybe he's the better role if you have both these guys that are going to be going out there. If you're wondering about who's more valuable, Sean Tucker in this one, he did tug on 2 red zone carries on 8% snaps. He also had a fumble not lost, and I imagine that might be part of the reason why he didn't get more opportunity in the game. Mike Williams in this game, or Mike Evans, I should say, he was only at 60% snaps coming back from that hamstring, 6 for 5 for 68. Red zone target, did lead everybody when it comes to air yards at 65. You're also looking at Jalen McMillan was at 63% snaps, only 2 targets. Trey Palmer was all the way down to 26% snaps. Sterling Shepard, if I can bring him up, he was at 54% snaps, 7 for 5 for 16 red zone target in this one. That would be deep leagues where you need that wide receiver 3 if you're going to be chasing that. I don't know how much I would necessarily want to be trusting that. And then more dynasty stuff, like Ryan Miller was at 23% snaps. He did have a target in this game. And then Raheem Jarrett. And this is mostly again for dynasty stuff, with the expectation that Mike Evans is going to be a year older and Chris Godwin may not be back. Raheem Jarrett was at 32% snaps, 1 for 1 for 30 in this game. Cade Otton is no longer a unicorn. That was kind of expected. This is stuff that we could project ahead of time. 82% snaps, 3 for 1 for 30 in this game, with Mike Evans coming back and becoming the quote unquote alpha again. Cardinals stuff. This was a really ugly game between them and the Seahawks, so I don't have a lot to say. the expectation that like Trey Benson was going to take over as the number 2, like basically like eat into James Conner. That didn't really happen. Only 16% snaps, 4 carries. And then DeMercado, and again, this was kind of a knife fight. He was back up to 16% snaps on top of that. Not a lot to say the rest of the way. James Conner was at 69% snaps. Marvin Harrison did have a red zone tug in this game. Was seeing some Twitter news when it comes to like the low amount of opportunities when it comes to Marvin Harrison relative to some of the other rookies that are out there right now. Greg Dortch did have the red zone opportunity in the game. And then speaking of your unicorns right now, Trey McBride may end up being the tight end one, 97% snaps, 15 for 12 for 133 in this game. Did have 84 air yards. Again, that's a little low on 15 targets, but again, it's 15 targets as a tight end and a red zone opportunity. All right, Chargers on Monday night, and unfortunately, I did not write down any notes for these guys at this point. But Justin Herbert, he did have the nimbly bimbly, the rushing touchdown to go along with fumble not lost. Again, this was kind of expected when it comes to this run of games. When it comes to Justin Herbert, I'd actually say like a little disappointed that it didn't turn a little bit more into a shootout. Did see that there was a lot of drops when it comes to Quentin Johnson in this game. No news right now. I did look this up. No news when it comes to the knee of J.K. Dobbins. And again, I would be expecting that like the trustworthy work is going to go to Gus Edwards. He is the one that had the red zone carry at the end of the game. He did tug on that. And then if there's going to be a guy that's going to have like quote unquote league winning ability, it's going to be Kaimani Vidal. He's not necessarily a design receiving back, but he does have like good receiving ability, the ball tracking stuff coming out of college. I did like that stuff. Still a possibility that Hassan Hoskins is going to ascend the depth chart a little bit more. He may end up being the guy. So like, from a strategy perspective, like putting these guys in your cart one way or another, like if you miss out on a guy on a waiver claim or fab or something like that, just put the other guy in the cart. Wait a week. It depends on how deep your league is, how much you need to be tracking these guys and burning roster spots when it comes down to that stuff. Let's see. Moving on to the wide receivers. I mean, Ladd McConkey's really good at football. 6 for 6 for 83 in this game. They probably should have been throwing more to him relative to Quentin Johnson. 5 targets. I did see like 3 of them were pretty bad drops. If you're wondering about that, did not track most of the other stuff when it comes down to it. And then Will Disley in this one, 75% snaps, 4 for 47. So if you want to continue to roll that, and then they did IR Hayden Hurst with a hip yesterday, it does look like. All right. Moving on to the Chiefs in this one. This is probably going to be your last week when it comes to rolling out Kareem Hunt. 55% snaps, 16 for 68, 4 for 3 for 19 in this one. Also looking at Carson Steele at 15% snaps, Samaje Perine at 32% snaps. The big question is going to be like, is Hunt going to be inactive? Is Steele going to be inactive? I'm going to go with like Steele's going to be inactive. Perine's pretty much going to be like holding it down. When it comes to Isaiah Pacheco, opens week with full practice participation 4 hours ago. If you're wondering about like rolling him out, I imagine there's going to be a certain amount, like he's not going to go full bell cow, but you're going to definitely get him for playoffs. It does look like it's going to occur when it comes down to that. DeAndre Hopkins, and I got to go to the Titans to talk about him. I got to take them off. DeAndre Hopkins, he was still at 45% snaps in this game, 6 for 5 for 35 and a touchdown. 2 red zone targets. Worthy, going back here, he's still operating as a wide receiver 2, almost like 64% snaps, 6 for 4 for 46, 62 air yards and a red zone target. He did have 62 air yards compared to Hopkins' 45 air yards in this game. Justin Washington was at 65% snaps, so he's like technically by snap count the wide receiver 2. Juju was at 55% snaps. He did have red zone target, and they're continuing to do the stuff where like this is why I would probably not be trusting anybody in this offense that is not like the running back that's going to get the red zone opportunities. Is Mecole Hardman at 5% snaps. He also had 2 red zone carries on those 5% snaps. And that's about all I got when it comes to those guys. Travis Kelce, going back to this one, he was at 89% snaps, 8 for 6 for 62 in this game. 2 red zone opportunities, 51 air yards. So again, like I'm probably not overthinking them if I spent on my Travis Kelce shares. And then Noah Gray is going to be the one big variable trying to guess this going forward. 59% snaps, 4 for 4 for 66, 1 red zone opportunity that he tugged on. and I believe he had 43 air yards if I wrote this down correctly. So again, like the bigger issue that I would actually have at this point is that like the snap share went down slightly. But again, if he's getting red zone opportunity and he's on the field this much, like, yeah, he's going to have a certain amount of spike weeks left in him for the rest of the way. Moving on to the Colts. I'll just start off with this. Don't have a lot to talk about outside of the wide receiver position right now. I did talk about this when it comes to Josh Downs right now, like probably not going to play this week, which means they're going to have vacated opportunities. They tend to rotate their tight ends. Jonathan Taylor is not necessarily a receiving back when it comes down to that. Vacated opportunities are likely going to go to the wide receivers. Your bigger question is going to be Anthony Richardson. I did see that the early stuff was better. The late stuff was not when it comes to Anthony Richardson and the Detroit game, if you're wondering about that stuff. So, that's going to be a big variable, like, being able to guess like what he's going to do. Michael Pittman was at 75% snaps in this game, 7 for 6 for 96, 79 air yards. So he's going to be flirting as a wide receiver too, especially with Josh Downs being out. Josh Downs was at 53% snaps, 7 targets, did have a red zone opportunity on 58 air yards. Alec Pierce was at 73% snaps, 123 air yards. So like this is the guy, like if you're in those type of leagues where you want to be chasing that spike week, he can get done in one play. And I talked about this in Chasing the Dragon. This would be the guy to either quote unquote like win your league or win your week. It would be Adonai Mitchell. The expectation that you're going to get back to this like week 10, 94% snap, 6 for 6 for 71. He did have another red zone opportunity on those 3 targets this week. All right, and I don't care about the Colts tight ends like usual. The Redskins, so kind of take some of this with a grain of salt. This was a wild one. Came down to like onside kicks and a desperation heave that Scary Terry was able to get home on 86-yarder late in this game, and then returned onside kicks and all this stuff. So I'm not quite as concerned with like the fantasy side of things, like real football wise. I'm also not concerned with this stuff because it's not what the point of the channel is. Brian Robinson with an ankle right now, whatever like wait and see mode means when it comes to that stuff. And remember on this one, when it comes to the Redskins, they are going to be playing on Sunday night. They're not one of the Thursday or Friday night games to be wondering about like some of these guys. Like you may have a little bit of opportunity to wait on these guys. Austin Eckler in the concussion protocol. And then the big beneficiary is going to be Jeremy Nichols. That would be, or McNichols. That would be the guy that I would imagine is going to step into that like ugly volume-based RB2 role. The main question is, and it does look like they did re-sign Chris Rodriguez. They cut him last week, and then they re-signed him. That would be a pretty good indication that they're not expecting to get B-Rob and or Eckler back this week. And then the other one would be Michael Wiley. He would be the guy that like may end up being like the 1B to McNichols or something like that at this point, because they held on to him and they let Rodriguez go earlier in the week. I don't really need to know how the sausage is made when it comes to Scary Terry. If you're wondering about that, like came really close to giving you that like memorable sub 40-degree day, 86-yard touchdown late in the game on that one. I did talk about Noah Brown here. And this one, like 73% snaps, 10 for 6 for 71. Let's see, 95 air yards on that. Luke McCaffrey was down at 26% snaps. That's dynasty stuff. I'm getting a little concerned about his usage overall. And then finally, like Zach Ertz, he's going to be like right on the cuff, depending on your league size, about like whether you should be rolling him out every week. 76% snaps, 8 for 6 for 38 and a touchdown. In this one, he did have 2 red zone opportunities. One of those he did tug on. All right, moving on to the Cowboys. I did see that right now they are tracking that Cooper Rush is going to be able to play this week with a knee. He did get pop up on the practice report, and this is probably more of whether or not we're actually going to get the possibility of getting nimbly bimbly Trey Lance out there. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. This is going to be a short week with Dallas playing on Thursday. Right now, like Zeke was at 20% snaps. Rico Dowdle was at 61% snaps, 19 for 86 in this one, 3 for 12. Did have a fumble lost. He also had a red zone opportunity. If you're going to be like thinking about rolling him out here, I wouldn't get cute. He should be in most lineups at this point, like as an RB2. It's more like the offense is not going to be good relative to his usage. CD Lamb limited again on Tuesday, back and foot. Like I imagine he's going to play at this point. 94% stat, 12 for 10 for 67 in this one. Let's see. Red zone opportunity. Only 43 air yards on those 12 targets. So again, like that means that they're not trying to push him vertically down the field. That was 43 air yards for him compared to 39 air yards for Jalen Tolbert in this game, and 62 for Brooks on Brooks and Tolbert's combined 7 opportunities. So again, like they're trying to get CeeDee Lamb the ball underneath because teams are going to take away the deep shots when it comes down to that stuff. Brandon Cooks was limited on Monday, whether he's going to come back right now. And that means like if you're going to be chasing some of the possibility of this with like Jalen Tolbert, 97% snaps, 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of them. And then Brooks was the main one at down to 29% snaps, 3 for 1 for 41, but he did have all the air yards in this one. And then the other one, if you're wondering, would be Jonathan Mingo, and he was at 23% snaps, 2 for 1 for 8 in this game. So like there's a possibility there's going to be vacated targets. There's also a possibility that those vacated targets are going to go to Brandon Cooks if he's activated at this point. Let's see. Right now we are tracking that Jake Ferguson is going to miss the game on Thursday. Where is he at? Right here. He is tracking another DNP on Tuesday. Probably not going to play this week. And then it just becomes an issue like, are you going to be able to get Luke Schoonmaker? And I have him written down. 65% snaps, 4 for 3 for 55, and a touchdown in this game. 22-yard touchdown, 26 yak to go along with that. And I did talk about this in Chasing the Dragon. If you're going to get spicy and try and get another week out of Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Span 4, the rookie out of Minnesota, he was at 50% snaps in this game, 2 for 2 for 24. 18 air yards on his 2 targets compared to Schoonmaker's 23 on his 4 targets. So, again, like I said, like I think if you roll out Schoonmaker again, you're getting a little cute, but like you do you when it comes to your roster. All right. The Dolphins. So Devin A-Train, and like I talked about this in the offseason when it comes to like what is a legendary upside running back. The guys that are winning your league, it's all the receiving work. So Devin A-Chain, again, this was a blowout primarily of the Pats. 53% snaps, 10 for 32 on the ground, 4 for 3 for 24, 2 touchdowns based off of that. Like 2 red zone targets. He tugged on both of those, also had a red zone carry. Raheem Mostert was at 31% snaps. He did have a red zone carry also in this game. 2 for 5 and then 1 for 1 for -3. The kind of thing to be looking at, interesting thing from a dynasty standpoint or building your playoff rosters. 19% snaps for Jalen Wright, 7 for 28, did have a target, but he also had a fumble lost in this game. So like paying attention to if that fumble is going to cost him playing time, or and then it's going to go back to Mostert, or whether or not like he's the guy to be holding going into the playoffs. All right. Tyreek Hill had 2 red zone targets. Jalen Waddle had a red zone target, 103 air yards to Hill's 40 in this one, if you're wondering. And then like 76% snaps, 9 for 8 for 144. He did tug. And then the other guys, this is all dynasty stuff. And this is kind of like interesting usage. If I can find Malik Washington. So he's still hovering there, 34% snaps, 2 for 1 for 1 in this game. And then OBJ on his 25% snaps, he did have another red zone target. So like he looks like he's a package guy coming in the red zone to get red zone opportunities at this point. And then Jonnu Smith, and this is one of the guys like the numbers say like chase him. He shouldn't have been available at this point. Like after this 81% snaps, he shouldn't be available. 69% snaps, 11 for 9 for 87 and a touchdown. You're looking at 36 air yards, 58 yak, 4 red zone targets. In this game, he tugged on one of those. Oh, yeah, he also had a red zone carry. So that's probably the bigger thing I'd be looking at with Jonnu Smith. Like, if you're going to be spending because he's still available in whatever magical leagues you're in, like, it's the red zone opportunities that become, like, really special when it comes down to that. All right. Moving on to the Eagles with Barkley. Like, I'm not going to have a lot to say on, like, the league winner. I'll just talk about the stats real quick. 68% snaps, 26, 255, 2 touchdowns. 4 for 4 for 47 in this game. Kenny Gainwell, he's going to be your cuff still in this blowout. 32% snaps, 5 for 22, and a touchdown. So again, if you're going to be cuffing, that's your guy. And then I didn't see any Will Shipley to see like if he's going to be the guy eating into Barkley if that happens. I don't know how much I really want to be chasing that. So Devontae Smith was out. A.J. Brown did A.J. Brown things without having the competition for opportunity. 7 for 6 for 109 and a touchdown. and you're looking at Dotson was at 68% snaps. He had a target. The other one, and this is a dynasty thing, Johnny Smith, 70% snaps and a target. So again, like there's a possibility that next year he's going to be functioning as the big X or the power slot in this offense. They're going to be able to move these guys around. Probably deep dynasty leagues, that would be the guy to be looking at in this one. Goddard was at 75% snaps to Calcaterra's 55. Falcons were on bye. I don't have anything to talk about when it comes to them that I wrote down, so I can skip them. Moving on to the Giants right now, it does appear that Tommy DeVito is going to start again. He was limited with a forearm, so if you're wondering about that stuff, the main thing to be looking at when it comes to the running backs, and I did go look this up with Tyrone Tracy. So he fumbles in the red zone, 41% snaps, 9 for 42 in this game, 4 for 4 for 28. So he got benched, and a lot of that 4 for 4 for 28 came in garbage time on the 2-minute drill at the end of the game. If you're wondering, they brought in Devin Singletary, and he vultured the touchdown here on his 36% snaps in the game. And then the other thing to be looking at is Eric Gray. He was getting usage, 25% snaps, 1 carry, and 2 for 2 for 7. He was getting usage before the fumble. So I bring all this up when it comes to Tyrone Tracy is like, yeah, if you're rolling him as like an RB2 or a flex or something like that, like there may be an zero floor when it comes to Tyrone Tracy. Like I would not be surprised that like you're definitely looking at a sub 40-degree day if the usage remains consistent after that fumble and with Eric Gray eating into him. All right, Malik Neighbors, that was what I was thinking about with like Marvin Harrison Jr. because I have it written down in my notes. The question about like Malik Neighbors versus Marvin Harrison Jr. and they're both like disappointing. They're having like very similar like statistical outcome on the season. That would be the conversation that I was looking at on Twitter, if you're wondering, when it comes to those guys. I don't even remember what it was. I didn't write it down. 1 red zone target for Malik Neighbors, 83% snaps for Wandale. Darius Slayton was at 58% snaps. He did have 2 red zone targets. And then Jalen Hyatt was down to 42% in this game. Theo Johnson, he is questionable right now with a back. Remains limited. 73% snaps, 6 for 3 for 39. And I want to bring this up. They are a Thursday night game. So if you're tracking on him in deep enough leagues. All right, the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence right now, he is tracking towards playing. This was yesterday he did practice on Monday. If you're wondering about all that stuff, and that's about all I have when it comes to the Jaguars. The Jets, I don't have anything written down for. They're coming off their bye this week. Let's see. Moving on to the Lions. They kind of beat down the Indianapolis Colts. So like take some of this with a grain of salt when it comes to their overall usage. David Montgomery did get knocked out early, 29% snaps. Did have a red zone opportunity that he tugged on in this game. Also was limited today, with a shoulder. And again, they're going to be one of those ones that is a Thursday night game. Where if you're wondering about that stuff, where that's going to go. The other thing is, and I did see them talking about like whether or not the Sun God was dinged up with his knee on the punt return stuff, and whether or not they're going to continue to roll him out there. Limited, but plans to play on Thursday. And again, like being able to track where those vacated opportunities are going to go. Are you going to get like full bell cow Jahmyr Gibbs with the vacated opportunities going to him, and then no David Montgomery is going to be the question. I talked about this a little bit in Chasing the Dragon when it comes to like Tim Patrick, whether or not he's going to step in if there's vacated opportunities with the Sun God potentially being out. I would tend to say like upgrade Gibbs, upgrade Laporta, upgrade JMO, and then you got to be in deep enough leagues to be chasing Tim Patrick on his 4 for 4 for 55. He also had a red zone opportunity in this game. That's about all I got. And then a DNP from Raymond that I had written down here with a foot. Unlikely to come in for week 13. That's why we could be talking about your Tim Patrick rolling out there. Sam Laporta, a little bit of a disappointing return from that shoulder injury. He did have 2 red zone opportunities. So very close to giving you, that love from that tight end position. So the Packers blew out the Niners. So again, take some of this with a grain of salt. Moving forward, Josh Jacobs didn't see this, like whatever questionable tag he's going on. He did have 7 red zone opportunities. He tugged on 3 of those. That's why he got that big massive spike week going on. Wilson was back to being the RB2. He did have 2 red zone opportunities, but Chris Brooks is still in the mix. He did have 3 red zone opportunities. And again, like 35% snaps when it comes to him. And that was the blowout going on with the 49ers. And then if I didn't talk about this already, I did have this written down in my notes, is Marshawn Lloyd. He's on the NFI, so he came off the IR, and then he goes on the NFI with the appendix, if you're wondering about that. So that's 4 weeks. If you're wondering, Romeo Dobbs right now, I would imagine he's going to be a long shot to play. Sits out practice on Tuesday with that concussion. And again, that's a Thursday night game. So I don't know how much you're going to be able to predict that he's going to play. So now we can start playing the game of consolidation of targets. Jaden Reed, a little bit disappointed in the blowout. 50% snap, 3 for 3 for 26. And Christian Watson, 65% snaps, 93 air yards on his 3 targets in this one. So like very close to being able to give you that like spike week. Bo Melton was at 32% snaps. Dontavian Wicks would be the beneficiary. I think if Dobbs is out, 50 or 39% snaps, 2 for 1 for 25 in this game. Malik Heath right here, he's the one that got the red zone target late in the game. He did score with 4:14 left to go in the game. That was the red zone target. It went to him. He tugged on it. Again, this was a blowout. That's why I would say I'm not as concerned with where that goes. Tucker Kraft, off of his disappointing week in week 11, he does have 2 for 2 for 26 and a touchdown on his 2 red zone targets. Don't have any news right now on Luke Musgrave coming off of IR. I did look it up this week. All right, moving on to the Panthers. Did watch a little bit of the tape when it comes to Bryce Young, and what I will say is some of this is, hey, why don't you plan an offense for the strengths of your player? That's all I have to say when it comes to watching some of the differences that's going on with Bryce Young right now. Chuba Hubbard in this game, 94 or 89% snaps, 7 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of them, 1 red zone target in this game. What I was a little bit more interested in, and there's Miles Sanders going on injured reserve, was I was expecting, and I can bring up Miles Sanders to talk about this, I was expecting that you're going to look at Jonathan Brooks working in this like 20 to 30% range that Miles Sanders has been doing behind Chuba Hubbard. And in this knife fight game against the Chiefs that the Panthers almost came back and won on, only 8% snaps for Jonathan Brooks, like 2 for 7. I imagine this will get ramped up with Jonathan or with the Miles Sanders being on IR, but like again, it's going to be really dicey to try and guess like how much to be rolling him out for the rest of the season. At best, by the time playoffs are coming around, like you may get some type of 50-50 split between the two of them. They paid Chuba, he's staying. I don't know how much I would be trusting Jonathan Brooks outside of holding on to him as a cuff with Chuba for the rest of the season. Xavier Leggett in this one, and then we can start talking a little bit about rolling out our Panthers shares because the Bryce Young and Panthers look so much better against the Chiefs. Chiefs are one of the better defenses in football. Leggett was at 94% snaps in this game, 6 for 4 for 56, 88 air yards. Jalen Coker did miss with a quad, if you're wondering where he was, and some of that may be a little bit suspect with Adam Thielen coming back in this one. 61% snaps, 4 for 3 for 57, only 34 air yards. He did have red zone tug. The main one to be looking at with all this, like if you're going to really think this is more than like a 1 week aberration, 94% snaps, 10 for 6 for 81 and a touchdown. Remember, like 8-year guy David Moore, I don't know how much I would necessarily want to be tracing this one. 2 red zone opportunities. Again, he tugged on one of them. 125 air yards. You got to be in deep enough leagues that you really need to be rolling out a guy as like a wide receiver 3 or a dart throw and want to be chasing this for the rest of the way. All right. See, Jatavion Sanders, he did play 19% snaps. He went out with a neck. What I saw yesterday is it says not as serious as they thought it was going to be when he went to the hospital. Tommy Tremble was the guy who stepped in. That's not entirely surprising. 82% snaps, 2 for 1 for 5. He did have 2 red zone opportunities, so you got to be in deep enough leagues that you want to be chasing that. The Pats. So they were blown out by the Dolphins. So a lot of the damage offensively came later in the game. First and foremost, like Ramondre, only 42% snaps, 8 for 13, 2 targets. Again, like chasing guys attached to like not good offenses is not the best thing in the world. 43% snaps when it came to Antonio Gibson, 16% snaps when it comes to Jamarco Hasty. If you're wondering, their usage has been all over the place this year, so I don't know how much I don't want to be cuffing a guy on a bad offense to begin with, and then to not know like what the usage is going to be. Like that 43% spike, probably not something I really want to be looking at. A wide receiver wise, first and foremost, we'll go to Keyshawn Butte. He's still going to be the guy that, like, if you are deep enough leagues that you want that like guy that can give you that spike week, it's still going to be him. 87% snaps, 4 for 1 for 6, 69 air yards. He's the guy that led everybody in air yards. You know, if you want that 40-degree day and you're in deep enough leagues that you got to be chasing like pieces of not good offenses, 68% snaps, 7 for 5 for 62 when it comes to pop. Like that's your 40-degree day. 29 air, 47 yak. That's how he's getting it done. And again, if you're wondering about like what direction that Jalen Polk's going, 33% snaps in this game. Kendrick Bourne was at 59% snaps. KJ Osborne was a healthy scratch. And then if there's a guy that's going to magically do something late in the season, like Javon Baker, remember, easy stuff look hard, hard stuff look easy. 16% snaps, finally got our first target. I imagine that maybe during the playoffs, you're going to see like a Javon Baker spike week at this point. 83% snaps when it comes to Hunter Henry, to 38% snaps Austin Hooper. And I bring this up because of this kind of scramble drill touchdown that Austin Hooper had. These were not red zone targets when he scored in this one. And then Hunter Henry, again, 83% says 8 for 5 for 44. He still might be the de facto number one behind like Pop Douglas and his limited air yards in this one. All right, moving on to the Raiders. So Gardner Minshew, he's done for the year when it comes to his broken collarbone. And then you're looking at Aiden O'Connell, deemed full practice participant with that thumb that he was put on IR for. So like that would be the guy I imagine is going to become the starter again. Desmond Ridder, again, it says like right there, struggles in week 12 loss. So I don't necessarily think you're going to get Desmond Ridder. Aiden O'Connell, I think, is better than Desmond Ridder in the first place. So let's talk about like how disappointing Dylan Labe was with vacated opportunities. He was active. He just did return stuff. He didn't actually get any offensive snaps. You're looking at 90% snaps when it comes to Amir Abdullah, 8 for 28, and then 6 for 5 for 37, and a receiving touchdown. That was a red zone opportunity in this one. And then the guy that they signed off the street, he's the guy that actually got 10% snaps, 5 for 33 in this game. Let's see. Jacoby Myers, he shouldn't be available in any league. I don't know why any leagues. He would be available at like 99% snap, 15 for 10 for 121. There. And then Trey Tucker was at 8 for 7 for 82 and a red zone opportunity, 62 air. You got to be in deep leagues to be chasing that. Brock Towers did have 2 red zone opportunity. Michael Mayer, this is all dynasty stuff if you're wondering. He was at 44% snaps, 2 for 2 for 11, but did have a red zone opportunity in this one. All right. The Rams, they were blown out by the Eagles. So we can get into this. Starting off with Corwin Williams, like he did have 2 fumbles, 1 lost, 91% snaps, 16 for 72, and a touchdown. 4 red zone opportunities, and again, he tugged on one of those. Blake Corum, the idea that we were going to get Blake Corum, that snap share to go up, it went down 9% snaps in this game. And then Puka and Cooper Kupp, I mean, they did special things. 80% snaps, 13 for 9 for 117 when it comes to Puka in this one. And then Cooper Kupp was at 95% snaps, 11 for 8 for 60, and a touchdown in this one. The other thing, this is kind of not from fantasy related. It may end up being fantasy related. Demarcus Robinson, I did see, got a DUI. So whether or not that's going to turn into vacated opportunities when it comes to like potentially getting like Jordan Whittington or Tutu Atwell or something like that, that may be something to be monitoring. He was at 80% snaps. He did have a red zone opportunity, and he did tug on that one. All right, and I'm getting to the point where I don't care about the Redskins tight ends. Let's see. Probably the last week I'd be looking at, you're looking at like Davis Allen tracking this 80% snaps. He was down to 48% snaps. Colby Parkinson, 30% snaps. And then Hunter Long, he'd probably be the receiving guy. He was only at 20% snaps. So they're no longer fantasy relevant when it comes down to it. No news on Tyler Higbee. Ravens on Monday night. And I don't have like hardly anything to say about them other than Deontay Johnson only ran 4 routes in this game. And again, that's not surprising if the rumors are that the Ravens traded for him because of the price and they were bolstering their depth, and they're just generally going to be running Zay Flowers, 77% snaps, 8 for 5 for 62, and Rashad Bateman, 57% snaps, 3 for 2 for 43, and a touchdown. And then Nelson Aguilar did have more snaps, or did have more routes run on his 45% snaps than Deontay Johnson in this game. If you're wondering, Mark Andrews, 42% snaps, 5 for 5 for 44, and a touchdown, versus Isaiah Likely's 54% snaps, no opportunities in this one. And then Derrick Henry, 24 or 60% snaps, 24 for 140, again, like your league winners. And then Justice Hill rips off a 55 or 51-yard touchdown on his 40% snaps, 4 for 51, and a touchdown, 2 for 7. So he's in that like low end desperation RB2 range. Probably it has a sub 40-degree day floor, but he has a 40-degree spike week that's built into him. He's done it on a number of occasions, so you got to be in like deep leagues to do that. Moving on to the Saints, I don't have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Saints, other than I did see that like full practice participation for Kendra Miller that was out there someplace on Twitter, if you're wondering about that. And the other ones, I did talk about this with like Chris Olave. Did see that he did have practice participation out there. So there may be a possibility that we're going to get like Chris Olave. This is all like Twitter rumors, so like take that with a grain of salt. All right, moving on to the Seahawks. And again, this was a really ugly script when it comes to the Seahawks and the Cardinals. So Kenneth Walker, he was down to 64% snaps, 16 for 41, 6 for 4 for 52. I didn't see anything about injuries or anything like that. Zach Charbonnet was at 38% snaps, 6 for 22 in this game. Both red zone opportunities went to Zach Charbonnet in this game. All right, and then from a wide receiver perspective, the only thing that I really saw was interesting was JSN was at 66% snaps, down 7 for 6 for 77, and a touchdown in this game. That was a red zone opportunity that he tugged on. Tyler Lockett was also at 64% snaps. He did also have a red zone opportunity, and I didn't see anything really notable when it comes to like DK and 78% snaps. Noah Fant was out again. This is dynasty stuff, and AJ Barner still didn't get done on his 84% snaps, 4 for 3 for 19. Moving on to the Steelers, so I don't necessarily think there's going to be a usage flop when it comes to the Steelers, but you're looking at Najee at 39% snaps, 16 for 41, 2 for 2 for 13 in this game. Red zone carry, red zone target. Jaylen Warren, he was at 57% snaps, 11 for 45, and a touchdown, 4 for 3 for 19. Red zone carry, he tugged on. And then finally, like weird usage, Cordero Patterson, 12% snaps, 1 for -2, did get a red zone carry on that one. George Pickens was at 90% snaps. He did have red zone target. Mike Williams at 28% snaps, no targets in this game. If you're wondering about Calvin Austin, and again, like remember, like size-wise, 5'9", 162, that's like slot flanker stuff. So that's probably not like an every down player. 58% snaps, 3 for 3 for 78, and a touchdown. In this one, that was a red zone opportunity, I believe. 71 air yards to George Pickens' 77. If you're tracking on all that stuff. Muth was at 64% snaps in this game. I just wrote down like probably don't care on that 4 for 4 for 59. I don't know if I can trust any of that stuff. Trying to chase that going forward. All right, the Texans, they were upset by the Titans in this one. And Joe Mixon, 77% snaps, 14 for 22, 6 for 5 for 23 in this game. 3 red zone opportunities. So like, the good and the bad with these guys, like that 34-point week followed by a 7-point week, at least he gets the receiving work. Nico was up to 79% snaps coming off that hamstring, 9 for 5 for 92 and a touchdown. In this one, that was a red zone tug. Did see that he had another touchdown called back. Tank Dell, he was at 84% snaps, 5 for 3 for 72. 101 air yards for him compared to Nico's 86. And Robert Woods at 31% snaps. Mechie continues to be the wide receiver 3 when it comes to snaps. If I can find him through my mic. He was at 71% snaps, 3 for 1 for 6. So, like, if you're deep enough, I don't think the offense is necessarily good enough to be trying to chase the wide receiver 3 in the offense with Dalton Schultz there. Dalton Schultz, 82% snaps, 2 for 2 for 20 in this game. Did have a red zone target And then dynasty wise, like what it's going to look like down the line with the Texans with Cade Stover, probably the possibility that he's going to be operating behind Nico. 36% snaps, 4 for 3 for 20 or 26, and a touchdown. That was a red zone target. So like that's some interesting stuff going forward. All right, Titans, and I already talked about this in Chasing the Dragon, so I'm not going to talk too much about the schedule. The Redskins are probably a good roll, but then Jacksonville twice, the Colts and the Bengals during the playoff run. This is all really good stuff when it comes to Will Levis. If you get a little bit of nimbly bimbly, he can actually like fall in the end zone based off of that, and then you get good enough usage. Also attached to like Calvin Ridley, who has all those vacated or uncatchable air yards that may become air yards down the line, and you have like Nick Westbrook-Akine. You have enough there with this defense that you can at least get serviceable. You should be able to project serviceable amount of work out of Will Levis heading into playoffs. And again, not be something that I'd be looking forward to outside of like deeper, darker one quarterback leagues, but definitely two quarterback leagues if he's available. There is that story that you can tell that you can get that stuff done. Full bell cow Tony Pollard. He was at 94% snaps with Spears out. He did have 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of them. No news right now on Spears. If you're wondering on that stuff going forward. Calvin Ridley, 79% snaps, red zone opportunity, 77 air yards. So like he may be in that like playoff MVP type conversation going forward after that ugly start for him to start the season in this case. And then you're looking at Nick Westbrook-Akine. Like he probably already should have been picked up. I would say like 12-man leagues, you're getting to the point where like he should be rolled out. 90% steps, 5 for 2 for 48 and a touchdown. And I do have written this down. On that 90% snaps, he had 116 air to Calvin Ridley's 77 air. So like again, weekly spike built in based off of the air yards and the red zone opportunities when it comes down to this. Chig, I don't care about. 76% snaps, 70-yard touchdown on his one opportunity that he has, if you're wondering about that right there. Only one opportunity. All right, finally, and finishing off with the Vikings right now. Sam Darnold, let's see if I have anything written down. Sam Darnold's schedule is the only thing I have written down to be looking at. Atlanta, maybe Seattle, Green Bay. Like this is like old stuff. I guess I got to clear that out if you're wondering. I would not be chasing that schedule. Aaron Jones with that 79% snaps in this game. 22 for 106 and a touchdown, 4 for 3 for 23, and a fumble loss. I bring this up because we were expecting that Cam Akers was going to end up eating into that a little bit more. Snap share up to 37% snaps week 11, down to 15% snaps, 3 for 19, 1 for 1 for 6. He would maintain the cuff with Ty Chandler. I think he has 0% snaps this week that I have written down. And then Jordan Addison, 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one, 99 air yards, 59 yak. That's how he had this massive spike week that he had. And again, I will talk about this a little bit late in the video from a strategy standpoint. Is like these type of wide receiver threes, like you have to be in like deep enough leagues to be rolling them on a week to week basis, knowing that they're gonna have a certain amount of spike. Otherwise, like if you're just trying to guess, you're gonna have that just as much possibility of being wrong as you are to be right at this point. And with him, like 521 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. That's with missing week 2 and week 3 right now. Again, trying to get cute on some of these guys. Like they can, you have to be able to think about like, do you want to see a Jordan Addison in the playoffs or do you want him on your bench? Because again, outside of like just throwing him in your lineup every week and expecting to get the spike, I don't know how much you're going to be able to get that. Jalen Naylor did have a red zone opportunity. He tugged on. And then with Josh Oliver out with that ankle, looking at TJ Hawkinson, 68% snaps, 9 for 7 for 114 in this game, and no red zone opportunities that I wrote down. So anyways, that's what I got for after waivers for week 13. And hopefully I will see you guys this week on the Grift.